guess here is where we begin. Can everyone hear reasonably well? Whoops, we're getting some feedback here. See if that will quiet down. I think that may be it. Yes, that's what it is. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll get this right. First thing is, this afternoon, our town moderator, Pro Tem, had to cancel because the library director, she works at the library director Barbarian is returning to work tomorrow from disability leave. She called a staff and trustees meeting for this evening. So what we'll be doing instead is either, we'll take turns going down the table calling on folks from the audience, but we may not need to do that because as we have a relatively small number of people here, versus 100 or so, we can perhaps be very informal about this. Let's see how it goes. As sort of introductory remarks, I would say that everyone sitting at this table deserves your vote just for having the courage and generosity to be a candidate. Michael Bohosky once said to me when he was Speaker of the Vermont House of Representatives that party leaders expect every member's vote except when it's bad for one's district. Selectmen and selectwomen, however, are free to vote as they please and have much more independence and responsibility. You have a right to know how we each would do democratically what is best for Vernon, which is why I organized this evening for you. Enjoy. Start with Mike.
Before we start, I know we've got a member of the press from Gardner Reformer here. Did everybody hear that? Before we start, I just wanted to acknowledge that I know we have a member of the Bradwell Reformer here. I'm not sure who you are, sir.
Middleborough Community Television.
BCTV? Okay, thank you. I apologize. I'm unaware of the format that we were supposed to have tonight. It was kind of short notice that I got in terms of being here. But my name is Michael Portermarsh. I am running or seeking re-election to the 3-year Select Board seat. I've been on the Select Board for the previous 4 years, and one thing I can attest to you is it is nothing that I had ever envisioned when I first started out on this quest. Between the crazy things that happen and trying to balance what's in the best interest of the town versus what people are asking you to do is a tremendous challenge. And you can't please all of the people all the time, and it's difficult. I tend to be a person who wants to please all of the people all the time, and I've found that to be one of my biggest challenges. But that being said, I thoroughly enjoy doing this, and I am seeking re-election. And again, I don't know how much detail we want to go in, but hopefully questions from the audience will lengthen the discussion and be able to prompt us for further detail. So to keep it brief, I'll pass it on.
I'm Christiane Howe, and I have been Select Board member 2008, and then again in 2009 and 2010, and I also am seeking re-election. And as Mike said, it is not a very easy job, but it's one that I love, and I put my heart and soul into it. Anybody that calls me, I act immediately and take care of the problem. I am the worker on the board only because, not saying that anybody else is not a worker, because we all do work hard. But because I'm home and I do the legwork for the most part. I'm on just about every committee in town. I have quite a few. I also am editor of the, managing editor of the Vernon newspaper, which we have put on hold because I had no help. And I am putting another one out for the 1st of March. So please look forward for that. And I do the radios around town, so people know me that way. I do a lot anyway. I'll cut it short. But I am seeking re-election, and I do ask for your vote. I work very hard. Thank you.
Howard Fairman. I'm a candidate for the same seat that Chris is running for, which is the one, I believe, from which Mike Ball resigned. You have my campaign flyer, so I'll say no more about it and pass it on to Sandy.
That was really short. I'm Sandy Harris. I am town clerk. For those who don't know, my plan is to retire in 2013. It's been my plan for a long time. And I would like to serve on the select board. I'm running for the 3-year seat. I have worked with the board for 18 years as their secretary, part of the time as administrative assistant as well. I serve on the Vermont League of Cities and Towns Board, and I've worked with the Vermont Municipal Clerks and Treasurers Association Board of Directors and the New England Municipal Clerks Association Board of Directors. And serving on boards is a great opportunity. It's a great education, and it's, yes, it's a challenge, but it's really neat when things work together. And we have a great town. I like to see it live.
Thanks. My name is Joshua Unruh. I probably have the least experience out of everybody here simply because of my age and my time here in town. I built a house in Vernon about 3 years ago. The thing that drew me to Vernon is all the facilities that they have for my kids. I have 3 kids that range from infant to 5 years old. One of them obviously attends here. The other one attends Vernon Preschool. The experience that I have had is for the last 4 years, up until September of this year, I've been the president of the Family Garden Early Education Centers in both Brattleboro and Putney. I get involved with that particular organization due to my children attending that facility. So over the last 4 years, I've had a lot of experience in essentially running a business through a board. I come from a business background. I've worked for the Brattleboro Reformer for the last 10 years. In advertising sales, so I know Chris, who's sitting out in the audience there. I was recently selected to be a board member to the Vernon Rec Department, so I've been doing that for several months now also. And you know, this is an all new thing to me, so it's one of those things where I sit out here and wonder what questions are going to be fired at me and whether I'll have any answers for you whatsoever based on not being on the select board before and not having previous experience with some of you folks in town and some of the things that come up. But, you know, it's something that I have a passion for, is being involved with, you know, whatever my kids are involved with or whatever town I'm in, and hope that I can do that for the town of Vernon.
For full disclosure, it will be put in my article that he does work. We will have an editor's note saying full disclosure that Josh does work for the company. Just for purposes of clarity.
Okay, my name is Jeff Dunkley, and I'm running for a 2-year term for Select Board. Just brief introduction, I have served on the Town Planning Commission for probably 5 or 6 years now. I'm a member of a family that has been longtime Vernon residents and small business owners for over 150 years. As I mentioned, in running for a 2-year term, I'm currently unopposed, and but I felt it important to show up tonight to listen to questions and hopefully answer any that people might pose for me as to the next few years in this town. I guess that's probably it as far as an introduction.
Mike has a question.
There's not enough room at the table. So, my name's Mike Collier. I'm running for the high school director. I've served on the Vernon School Board and on the high school board before, and I'm running unopposed as well. But if you have any questions, I'm really nice to answer.
And I'm Mary Ann Gardner. I'm currently on the Vernon School Board and on the high school board, which I'm not running for, Mike is. And I'll be running again for the Vernon School Board, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'm Mary Lynn Sherlin, and I'm running for re-election for delinquent tax collector.
I'm Scott Lane, and I'm running for re-election of second constable.
And by the way, everyone is certainly invited to come up to the table. We can set up more chairs up here, as you please, but welcome.
Carol Hammond's sitting back there. She's running also.
Carol Hammond running for auditor.
Are we open for questions? And by the way, we do have the usual portable mics here, which can be passed around the audience if anyone wishes.
I'd like to say something that I didn't say. I was on the 2-year seat. I switched over to run on Mike Ball's unexpired term, just so that you know that I was on a 2-year. Now I'm running for the 3-year along with Howard and the other, Josh and Stan Sage, who isn't here this evening.
Yes. The floor is open for questions and anything else anyone would like to say. Including, yes.
I am wondering if any of you would like to voice your opinion on the question of perhaps having the town have a town manager or town administrator. Your views or thoughts on that?
Okay, go Mike.
Well, the topic has come up numerous times in the past several years, and I find it would be a very beneficial position to have within the town. For those of you who follow the select board closely enough, you'll notice that the majority of our work, or the majority of things that we tackle, happen to be administrative things that a town manager should be handling, which takes away a lot of our precious time and allows us, or doesn't allow us, to focus on some of the bigger things that we should be focusing on. And again, I think having that position would be a very beneficial thing to the town. However, those positions come at high costs. And for such a small community of approximately 2,200 people, I really can't justify spending $80,000 to $100,000 for a town administrator. I do have thoughts on an alternative that the board has discussed. I shouldn't say the board, but there have been discussions on the side. But having a position that dealt primarily with the human resources aspect of things, which would free the treasurer up tremendously to allow her to concentrate on fiscal responsibilities, and thus be the buffer between the employees and the select board to enable us to focus on the things that we would need to focus on. Just having that human resource piece would not be as expensive as a town administrator. We currently have an employee who is very knowledgeable in human resources and personnel, as well as knowledgeable within state statutes and things of that. A lot of the same functions that an administrator could handle, but not to the extent of it being an actual administrator. And I personally, as a taxpayer, would think it would be more beneficial to look into this lesser level position than that higher level position. And that's one of the things I would like to see the next board concentrate on, is finding some sort of fit within the realms of that question.
Didn't we have an administrator at any time? Is that Bonnie or something?
Bunny.
Yeah. How did that work?
Yes.
Was that a good thing?
There were two sides to every question, and in some aspects it was very good, and in some aspects it was not. An administrator does not have the same power as a manager. So what happened with Bunny was she was given duties to do, but she really didn't have the power to do that, which tied her hands, which caused problems. You have a really good, just like a teacher, a really good town manager, you can't pay enough. And a really bad town manager can really mess up your town. So you have to be careful.
Pay to get rid of them.
It's true.
Well, she retired. She didn't get fired or anything. She retired. I felt I was treasurer at the time, and I felt that she was very beneficial for the things that she did. The select board was prepared. Each select board at their whenever they could, they'd go to her office. She'd prepare them for the meeting. When they got to the meeting, they had paperwork and everything was all laid out for them. I felt she was very beneficial. But as far as right now, I agree with Mike. We have talked off to the side as far as administrative assistant or a town manager, but it is going to be an expense that is right up there. And I'm with him as far as the human resource person. I think that would be very, very important and very beneficial for the town. And it would be so much easier on Sally, I believe. Sally does a lot of work.
The two of you have. Yes. The okay. I don't know what to say to that.
I'll let you get away with that one.
I knew you would. Two very experienced folks in town affairs have some excellent ideas. I would simply add to it that we certainly should have this discussion in our town, and that perhaps we should inquire of towns of our size to find out, perhaps through Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns, who are doing something like that with only 2,000 or 3,000 population. I know that town manager works very well in large towns like Brattleboro or Springfield, with which I'm familiar. But the thing is, how would we do it, as they have very well pointed out, and has Sandy as well, in such a small town. But there may be other towns that can show us something, either what to do or what not to do. Anyone else want to comment? Town administrator, manager?
Like I said, quickly. I think I agree with so far at the further end of the table. Looking at a town manager would have a lot of merit, and for better or worse, our local government is modeled after something that's been in effect for 200 years. A select board member, essentially a volunteer, part-time crew of management, operating, to me, what is essentially a small business, multi-million-dollar small business in town, with many different departments. And I don't think it's always the most effective form of management. And obviously a good town manager would cost some money, but how much are we losing by not having better management of our town?
Well, we didn't feel this year was the year because we were unsure of Vermont Yankee, whether they were going to win the case or not, because we really had to think about cutting budgets and or keeping it at a certain level, and then we brought it down just a little bit farther. We tried very hard, so administrative assistant or town manager was definitely off the table this year because of the uncertainty of BY.
That would actually be one of my concerns going forward, and something I thought about a lot before deciding to run for select board is, if this was my business, quote unquote, what would I do with it? And putting a town manager in place with the high cost, high salary that comes along with it, doesn't really seem like a great idea at this point. Some alternatives probably should be discussed, but even with Vermont Yankee winning the case that they have won, there's still some uncertainty out there. And, you know, they talk about that they've cut the budget and everything like that. That budget probably needs to stay cut for the foreseeable future until we have a clear determination of where VY ends up.
Yes.
Going right from there, maybe address this to Jeff, perhaps first because he's been on the planning board. We don't know whether we're going to have another 20 years of Yankee, or if we have 5 years. What would be your thoughts about preparation? Because I know that in the beginning we set up funds. That's basically all we did, was set up funds to help down the road when we didn't have the plant, but that's pretty much what it kind of stayed there. There wasn't a lot more done than that, which I realized it was a tremendous thing. But what are your thoughts on, like, whether it's, WRC or Vernon Planning Board, in the event that we don't have it? I mean, at some point, we're not going to have it, so.
I think fortunately, with our work with the Town Planning Commission, currently there's a project that we're involved with that last year it was a little more imperative when it appeared Yankee was for sure shutting down in another month. But that's exactly what the study is to do, is to look at when Yankee shuts down. It's not a matter of if, but it is a matter of when, whether it's, if energy just decides to pull up stakes next year or 5 years from now, or if it continues for 20 years. But my generation was the first one to enjoy the full benefits of Yankee in this town. I don't recall a time when there wasn't a swimming pool there, or a rec center, or many of the benefits that...
I do.
Yeah.
So does an Howard. So does a Sandy. It's out here, we remember.
And I mean, and to me, that's a great benefit to have some generations that do recall what it was like, because eventually that's what it's going to be like again. And for better or worse, like I said, we enjoyed many of the luxuries that plant brought to this town, but it's dangerous to rely upon a one industry in any town, whether it's a West Virginia mining town or a Nebraska meat packing plant town, that you're so reliant upon that one industry that I think it's important going forward that we do try to diversify our industry or our commercial businesses in town to meet that eventuality when the plant's going to shut down, the reactor goes cold. Looking back, that if more money was saved for an emergency fund, we do have some savings, but I think that should be considered an emergency fund in a sense, but again, with this study looking at for when Yankee closes, I think it'll give us some good ideas as to how to plan for the next few years and the next several decades. I have a 6-year-old daughter who lives in town that we've made a comment several times that it would be nice if kids of that generation would be able to enjoy everything that we did growing up.
Can I interject something here? We don't have any funds that are just there, sitting there, building up and waiting for a rainy day fund. each fund that we have is earmarked for a certain reason, for a certain thing. I understand that, but saving it for a rainy day fund, I think you'll find in the statutes that's illegal. So they were earmarked for certain items as well. Okay. Right.
I think being kind of naive to the financial situation of the town, simply from not being on the board prior, we have to go about as a town planning that Vermont Yankee doesn't exist this year and doesn't exist next year and going forward. We're obviously going to feel the benefit for Vermont Yankee for the next however long it's there. And that's great. But from a business perspective, we have to go about our budgeting and our planning just like we do in our own personal lives. My wife and I looked at each other and said, hey, if Vermont Yankee closes, we got to be prepared to pay more property taxes because that's reality for us. And that's the same way it's going to be for our town. We have to plan ahead and be aware that, you know, we are going to have some additional expenses that are now covered by Vermont Yankee. And we have to plan and budget accordingly and understand, hey, that money may go away and will go away at some point, and we need to have either the funds or the plan in place already that we're running our town or our business, quote unquote, without that money in our mind, I guess.
Well, I know that twice the Planning Commission in my tenure here has been looking into industrial parks. Both locations they were looked at are no longer available. I think that we need to plan for the future. I know that the state, they have the TIF program that's out there, and they're going to be, you know, offering that to more than just the big cities, which we might want to look into sometime down the road. But we do need to plan for it. Like Chris, we were here before Vermont Yankee. We're going to be here after. We remember what it's like. I'm not sure that you really benefited, Jeff. Sometime in a way before Vermont Yankee and all the money, we were a lot closer community, which is sad, and I think we need to change that now.
Personally, I'm as sure as I can be that the state will appeal Judge Murtha's decision that will eventually wind up before the Supreme Court of the United States, because it's a very interesting states' rights case. That said, this will take years, and we could expect Yankee to keep running until then, but there is something to keep in mind, and that is 3 nuclear power plants in New England have been closed already. Yankee Row, Maine Yankee, and one of the units at Connecticut Yankee. In every case, it was closed because something happened that they decided was not worth fixing. Now, about 10, 12 years ago, the steam dryer over at Yankee was very much in the news about how it kept cracking and they were afraid something bad was going to happen. I called up, excuse me, I think this was before Energy owned it anyway. I called up headquarters up there on Ferry Road, and I said, you know, I keep hearing about the steam dryer. Isn't it like a part on my car where if the car was otherwise okay, you'd simply get a new part, in this case a steam dryer, and put it on? And the person I spoke with said, well, actually, you don't know how much a steam dryer costs. This could be a deal breaker as to whether the plant should continue running or not. So there are components over there that could fail, and we would suddenly find ourselves without Yankee, or on the other hand, this might never happen. But we do have 3 examples not far from here where that is exactly what happened, and quite suddenly they found themselves without a nuclear power plant. So my suggestion is that we plan for both possibilities, for the possibility that the plant runs for 20 years, but also, as we do in our personal lives, plan for the possibility that something could go wrong.
I could possibly not disagree with anybody. Of course, we need to watch that and get our budgets under control. And we have started that as select board. We have tried that, started that this year, and I hoped that it would continue.
Again, I can't disagree with anything anyone has said here. Mr. Fairman is absolutely correct in his statement. There are components in that plant that are so costly to replace that it wouldn't be beneficial for them to replace them. Additionally, with what's happening on the state level, there is no question in my mind that they would not appeal the decision either. But as you've already seen, some of the legislature that's being spoken about in Montpelier is in regards to major taxes against Yankee, major taxes on what's sitting there in storage. And if the state, continues along this route, it may not even be profitable for them to continue with all of these additional taxes. I don't know, I'm just speculating here, but that's the discussions I've heard about. So like everyone else has stated, we need to start this immediately. Next year, the Select Board is going to be tasked with a new tax stabilization commitment with Yankee, because it's going to be a new operating license. So in addition to working on that huge project, a second project should run side by side with that in regards to what are we going to do in the event something happens that the plant is not there. And like everyone else has said, or like Chris has just stated, the board has begun starting that discussion. We've talked endlessly about ideas about how to make people work more efficiently, or not make people work more efficiently, but more efficient operations of the town offices. I mean, why should a supervisor who's making $18 to $20 an hour be out mowing lawns? Why can't a high school student be doing that? Just cost-benefit analysis on all the positions. And it's not just the town employees, it's the town itself. When I first started, one of the big things that I worked on was recycling. And the town saved lots of money just by removing things from the trash stream and putting it into the recycling. A year later, we started our own composting program, and we've had hundreds and hundreds of tons of compost diverted from the waste stream, and that has saved a significant amount of money from our tipping fees. And if we can just pursue things like this, just simple ideas, on the town side and on the business side, then I think we're making steps in the right direction.
Mike, what is our current tax sum for Vermont Yankee? What is that for negotiation?
It should be starting March 21st, whenever the official end date for the last license expired. I mean, that should have been begun by now, I would think. The tax stabilization committee, of which Carol is a part of, I'm a part of it, Patty O'Donnell is a part of it. One of the things that have been holding us back is we're actually waiting for our assessor, Skip, to make his move, because he's going to have to go in and do a whole bunch of work in there to get the figures we need in order to set forth talks on a new agreement. And I know right now he's tied up with another utility in town. I hope that answers your question.
Well, if we don't have an agreement, we're going to continue with both parties are going to abide by the current agreement?
I would assume that the current agreement would stand until we were able to sign a second one. They are a good corporate neighbor, and I think, it's something that we could let, or something that would slide until we got a new one in place.
Last year at town meeting, Treasurer Brassor said that Yankee currently pays about 53% of Vernon's property taxes. Yes, sir.
As a select board member, how would your relationship with the police and fire departments go?
Are you addressing that question to everyone?
Everyone.
Could you be more specific? I mean, how would our relationships be?
I'm trying to be vague.
Well, I can give you a vague answer.
The select board in the past has had a reputation for being a little more hands-on with certain departments in town, whether or not you agree or disagree with that statement, but how would you as a member try to rectify or clarify that position?
Okay. In terms of hands-on, that's another vague statement. I can take that in two different ways. We've had people claim that we have micromanaged them, and that would be too much hands-on. I want to disagree with that, and I'll start with our relationship with the department in the past. A previous select board had received numerous complaints about the operations of a department, and we went out and we hired a consultant. We spent a lot of money on that consultant who came in and really observed and looked at the policies and procedures that were in place and got a great overall picture of the department and brought recommendations back to the board. And what the board did with those recommendations was to try and foster a relationship where we could say, look, this is the problem, let's work on it to make it better and move forward. That's all we've tried to do, and we continue to try to do that. We lost one police chief, and in the interim, the sheriff's department came in. A lot of people were thrilled that they saw a lot of law enforcement happening. A lot of people weren't thrilled because they thought it was overkill. It's one of those things where everybody's got a different perspective. When we got a new police chief, we came in and we said, look, this is what happened in the past, this is what we've learned, this is the results of the consultant or the recommendations of the consultant, and this is what we've heard from the townspeople. You know, let's do this. It was never anything about micromanagement. It was all about just taking the tools we had and trying to work with the department to make it what would be best for the town of Vernon. Same with the fire department. We've had members on the board who served within the fire department. So there was a heavy interest in trying to make that department what would be best for the town. Additionally, with the police department, we have liaisons on the police department. They've worked very closely with the police department. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but in terms of how we've worked with them, that's a brief synopsis of at least the perspective from this side of the board.
I'm sorry that I've been very brief, but I'm trying not to talk much at all. But I'm with Mike, and I hate to keep saying that, but we have tried very hard to work with the police department and the fire department, trying to, when you say micromanage or hands-on, I don't think that we've ever done that. And the thing that with the fire department, I joined the fire department, I was on the fire department, I was also a board member on the fire association. When they came to us and presented us with an ordinance, I fought against the ordinance, not because I felt that we didn't need one, because I do feel that in a sense we do need one. One where, because people that, you know, they let their kids go off on a snowmobile, for example, only an example, and they go 90 miles an hour and they fall off and they get hurt. We don't want to see that, but that causes all our EMSs and our fire departments, our police department, everybody go out. They should be charged for things like that. The thing that I didn't agree with was medical. They were going to start charging people that called 2 or 3 times a day for medical expenses and things like that. I was totally against that. I know myself, I can't afford, I have a husband that is going to kill me if I tell everybody that he's sick. But he needs medical attention every now and then. And I know that I have called rescue twice in one day because his sugar was off. he needed a shot. That shot would cost $100 if we let that ordinance go through as it was written. I felt that that was too much to ask of our people. So if that you want to call that too hands-on, then fine. But I'm not against the ordinance, just the wording of that medical part. As far as supporting them, I absolutely support them 100%. The police department, I have no problems with them as it is right now. None at all.
If elected to the board, I would like to be the liaison with the police and fire departments. My view is that the fire chief and the police chief have been appointed to manage their departments. That means they have that responsibility, and adequate authority always has to accompany responsibility. It seems to me further that the liaison, the board liaison to any town department should be that department's friend and advocate to the board. There are 4 other board members to challenge whatever the department brings forward along with its liaison. So it seems to me that the liaison must be on the department side in terms of how can I help you do what is best for Vernon. This would mean helping them to put together their proposals, helping them to bring them to the attention of the board and to Vernon citizens at large and anyone else who would like to be involved. Because, as I say, we have citizens out there, we have 4 other members on the board who certainly can play the devil's advocate or simply oppose should they choose to do so. So I think, in sum, I think a liaison is very important. I would like to be that liaison to those 2 departments, and that person should be that department's friend and advocate, because there are plenty of other people to take the other side.
I also think that I would hope that all the departments, police and fire included, would be treated with respect, and that they in turn would then be able to respect the board.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Sandy's statement that, everybody kind of has to work hand in hand to the same cause. The worst thing that can happen within any town is to have different departments going different directions away from what the select board would, see as a group together to be correct, or to be beneficial to the town. It's kind of a peace, love feeling that everybody has to work together, and I feel that, if the people that are in the positions that they're in now, if they're not able to, work together as a team with the select board, maybe they shouldn't be in those positions that they're in. If they are willing to work together with the select board to, do what's best for the town in the eyes of, our residents, in the eyes of the select board, then, that's great. We'll continue to work with those folks.
Going way back to the beginning, I agree. It was kind of a vague question with obviously it was kind of pointed. And so I'll just answer to the effect that, the last few years, opening the pages of the Brattleboro Reformer, oftentimes when I spot that there's an article about Vernon, and getting into the article, I usually have some mixed emotions by the end of that article in the Reformer. And all too often, one of those emotions that's in the mix is slight embarrassment for our town. And I guess I'll kind of leave it at that. In the future, if there's a possibility for a less contentious relationship amongst the board members and individual department heads, I'll endeavor to assist in that philosophy.
You brought up the composting and the trash pickup and so on as being an expense that, yes, the composting has cut down on our tipping tipping fees, is that what you call
Yes.
them?
Yes.
And we think it's a great program. And, but it still irritates us to drive around town on trash day and see cardboard and things sitting out by the side of the road for pickup that shouldn't be there. They should be put down in recycling bins. And I wondered if the town has given any thought to something like what Brattleboro did, where it's kind of mandatory to
I can't tell you how much that irritates me as well. We have had brief discussions amongst the board, public discussions, where we have discussed that. And I think the general consensus of everyone is this is a big decision, and it's a decision that the town should make. And there was a hope that this could possibly be a topic at town meeting. I mean, mandatory recycling. That's happening in Brattleboro right now. If they pick up your trash and they shake it and they hear a can or a bottle, they're going to leave it there. We could do that. But there's a lot of people in Vernon who don't have the ability to bring their stuff down to the transfer station. And you know, there would be thoughts of groups like maybe the Boy Scouts, maybe they could do a Saturday pickup, just something like that. It's a huge encompassing project that I also am a member of the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District. That's another way I spend some of my free time. And we've had discussions at that level where possibly we could have them do a feasibility study of us even opening up some sort of transfer station in Vernon where we would handle our own trash. Again, the consensus of the board when we've had those discussions there was maybe get this feasibility study done, maybe get some figures in order, and then bring it to the town as a whole. But I've been pushing for this the whole time I've been on the board, and I think it is a wonderful idea. It's not only green, but it's going to save us some green, so we should do it. Thank you for your comments.
On the recycling, no, I absolutely agree, but we'd have to bring it to the townspeople to vote on it, whether they want to do it, we can't just something the town vote on.
Certainly, the more we can recycle, the less we pay in tipping fees, and of course it's also environmentally responsible as well. I'll offer a couple of ideas that I've run across elsewhere. There are some towns where trucks come around to pick up the recycling. Actually, Brattleboro is one of them, where they have bins on the truck for the various sorts of cans and bottles and so on. And also, you probably have seen the commercial on TV as well. Casella Waste Management up in Rutland is now advertising zero sort recycling. They have a recycling plant where they take care of all the sorting. Now, I suppose there are certain things you're not supposed to put in there, but so I'm simply suggesting we might want to look into the alternatives to what we're doing currently, perhaps involving, as you mentioned, not everyone can get down to by the town garage there, to have pickup, and possibly look into, can someone give us this sort of very easy recycling that Casella calls zero sort.
Single stream recycling is how that's referred to as, and unfortunately at this point our waste management district cannot support the single stream, and that's why that wouldn't happen. Additionally, having the trucks come around, we probably could look into that, but that would be another additional expense, which would probably offset what we saved in tipping fees. But it could very well promote more recycling, which down the line would make a big difference.
Well said.
I think for me, my background is marketing, and the most effective thing that I've seen us do as a town thus far is to put the cost savings in the Vernon newspaper. When I first moved here is when we really started talking about the recycling in Vernon. And every time that I saw the amount of tonnage being recycled versus, the amount of going in the trash and the savings that came along with it, it encouraged me to recycle in my own home. And I do it all the time now. And I do it for two reasons: because I know it's the right thing to do, and secondly, I know it's going to keep my taxes down in the long run. And as I said, I'm a big fan of marketing, so I think maybe one of the easiest things that we could do right out of the gate is to promote the recycling in the town more by having, posters at the town hall and different things like that. There may be some of that stuff already in place that I'm just not aware of. But the only way that I've, seen it done very well is through the Vernon newspaper. With the loss of that, particular thing in town, we need to, find different ways to get that message, that same message out there. I don't know what that looks like, but there needs to be some way to, market the benefit to all of our citizens, and so they can understand what it's all about, if they don't understand it already.
If there's no other questions, yes.
Just a comment, probably one way to market that would be, where it hits people the most is their pocketbook. Okay, how much, like, when we put the town report together, we usually do a pie chart that shows, based on the overall budget for the town and how much each department, the percentage that each department is of the budget. And, you can, Sally does a fantastic job. She can, we did this last year just for, among ourselves. What would happen, if we did not have Vermont Yankee as part of our mix? What would our tax bill look like? And with our recycling cost, I know that's a big part of, that's in the selectmen's budget. And, things like that can be broken out so that people can see, okay, if this were, cut by, I can't, off the top of my head, I can't even think what the numbers are on the between the tipping fee and the other part.
There's the trucks coming into town.
Right, okay. And, just how much, what that translates into when you take the dollars and cents and how that affects people's tax rate, whether it's 2 cents or, whatever. And things like that that just make, it's marketing. It is. It's bringing to people's attention, and we've got to be more aware of it as time goes on. And I think you as a board, whomever is elected, thinking of going forward with, I like what Josh said, considering as if we did not have Vermont Yankee right now, what would our budgets look like? And we don't have the luxury anymore of waiting 5 years. I mean, we need to do it now. And I think you've got the work cut out for you.
I would just like to say about the property taxes. There's some people with the property tax rebate, some people, it doesn't matter what you do with the town or the school, it doesn't matter how much your taxes go up, they're not going to feel the effect of it. So it doesn't really hurt their pocketbook. And some people are just too lazy to, unless you force them to do it. But when was Vermont Yankees supposed to close?
March 12th.
And now we're talking about that this would be a good time to set up an emergency fund. I mean, we should have had this done a long time ago. I mean,
The whole state is in that. It's not just Vernon. Nobody has thought about this. Everybody just thought it would run forever.
well, nothing much, but
You set up your funds and you name your funds, and it has an objective.
it must be a way to get around it.
Well, the
If you
funds
have
are
a
already
fund,
set
you
up.
name it up.
I'm aware of all.
But
Right.
I mean, you just, yeah, obviously you have to have an intent and purpose
Right,
for
exactly
the
right.
fund, but you just can't say emergency fund.
No, well, we have, I'm sorry, is it okay? Howard, did I speak? I'm sorry.
Of course.
I didn't mean to.
Because your voice is bothering you, that's all.
Well, the thing is that you cannot have an emergency fund, period, unless it's an emergency capital repair fund, an emergency repair replacement fund, things like that. It has to be earmarked for something. Because a municipality is set up so that you cannot, you're not in the market, if you will, to earn money. You see what I'm saying? That's not against the statutes.
I would just
That's what you would have to do.
I'd like to thank Howard for setting this up.
Yes,
I think this is a good start.
Yeah.
We need to have more communication between the town and select board.
Come to the meeting.
To come to the meetings.
That's right. They can come, love having people come.
It seems to me that in Montpelier, they're on the one hand saying, we know that Governor Shumlin and a great many legislators want Yankee closed as soon as possible, and they're doing whatever they can to make this happen. But at the same time, they've been milking millions out of Yankee for decades, which of course they will lose when the plant closes. But now they tell us that the plant very well may sit over there closed until the end of this century. We're only in 2012 now, until 2099 or beyond, until someday there may be enough money to decommission it. So on the one hand, we've taken the risk. Everybody says there's a risk to having a nuclear plant. We've taken that risk during 40 years. And now they're saying, why don't you keep taking on that risk, because we're going to leave the most dangerous part of the plant right there, which is the nuclear fuel. Well, it seems to me that Vernon is in a position where we certainly should say, well, if you're going to ask us to do this on an ongoing basis, we should receive some financial compensation for that, and I'm proposing that it could be simply an amount equal to the current Vermont Yankee property taxes adjusted for inflation, payable annually until the site has been restored to what nowadays they call a green field. In other words, it's perfectly good for any reasonable purpose. In other words, I think Vernon should be speaking up perhaps more than we are for our side, because they're going to keep telling us we want the plant to close. There's no doubt about that. The anti-nuclear activists have been working on this for the past 40 years, and they will continue, and so they should. But on the other hand, there are pro-nuclear people who perhaps could be helping us to advance the other case that if we're going to continue hosting the plant, hosting the remains of the plant, that we should receive some financial compensation for that. And what I've tried to do is make a reasonable proposal. Just let us have the money we're getting now.
Thank you, Howard, for putting this together.
You're welcome.
As I had said earlier, I remember it's been 19 years. The last time we had this was 1993. I was rerunning for treasurer. So thank you. I think this is very important.
Glad to do it. Do we, concerning the question that was just before us here, would anyone else like to say anything at the table? We've been doing this for about an hour now. Is there anything else that you would like to say? I know, for example, you, Chris, probably as a representative of the press, should feel free to ask other questions you'd like to ask.
I'd actually like to take off my reporter fedora and put on my town of Vernon resident hat. There's been a few people in town talking about possibly having a farmer's market in the town office area, so we wanted to see if people from the select board, if elected, would like to help doing that. And we actually wanted to talk to you sometime down the line about getting assistance from possibly the Farmland Protection Committee. I know it's kind of defunct at the moment, but maybe starting that up again and having that sort of organize and take the reins if we did want to have some sort of localized farmers market in Vernon.
We actually approved a farmer's market for the recreation department maybe 2 years ago.
I talked to the Millers in regards to that, and they were, I think, the only folks who were really taking advantage of it. But we thought maybe having a more centralized location with more visibility and obviously a little more, press coverage and be able to get at least a dozen vendors.
Oh, I think that would be a wonderful idea. Another thing that's been floating around several select board meetings is fostering more of a sense of community in Vernon, because that seems to have disappeared. And we haven't had the town picnic, and we're not doing any town dinners at the recreation department or anything like that. And it's sad to see that stuff go. And I would love to see anything like that happen again. And as a member of the new board, I would support anything like that.
And I would definitely support that as well. I've even, years ago, I had a sewing group, a girlfriend of mine and myself, we started a sewing group downstairs, and we met every Tuesday or Wednesday, and I'm not quite sure. I don't know when that stopped. It had to have been between 96 and 2000. I don't, and it has not been since. And I have approached the board and asked them if I couldn't start that back up again. And it doesn't necessarily mean sewing; it could be any craft. And they have definitely said yes, we should do something like that. Bring it more into the community. Absolutely.
Chris, I think you raise an excellent point that it doesn't necessarily have to be things to eat or things that, if the things it is to eat, that they came from a farm, because it can be crafts, it can be many things. I'm familiar with the farmers markets, and let me think, Brattleboro, Putney, and Bellows Falls. They're all wonderful places for community gathering, which is something that you mentioned, Sandy, that we could certainly use more of here in Vernon. I also would mention that with the farmers market, just as with anything else, all it takes is one or two people to make the moves to get it going. To have this forum, all I did was make a couple of phone calls, and it pretty much put itself together from there.
And there is a policy about not doing business on town property, but they can change that, which should be done.
Chris and I have talked about this at work, and I'm fully on board with something like that happening for two different reasons. I've heard a couple of times that the sense of community in Vernon has kind of waned a little bit. I don't see that in my personal life because my children are involved in so much stuff. So maybe that kind of happens with a group of folks that don't have kids anymore. They don't have a place to kind of congregate outside of some of our local places like the schoolhouse grocery or something like that. So I would definitely be in favor of any of those type of community events that would be able to bring the town together. I think I mentioned at the beginning that I'm on the recreation committee here in Vernon, and I've been talking with our director and that kind of thing about some of the missing pieces in Vernon that I've seen over the last few years, the 4th of July fireworks and things like that have gone away, that were a huge draw to me when I first built a home here. So I think the recreation department is going to try to start doing a better job with those things, and bringing back some of those community events if at all possible, if it works within our budget constraints and all that kind of thing. And as a select board member, I would be all for that. Besides the fact if we did it at the town hall, it's right across from my wife's new business, and it would probably bring more business in, which would be great.
Yeah, I would definitely be supportive of a farmer's market and supporting local businesses in our town. One of the common themes that we seem to have is a loss of community and a sense of knowing who your neighbors are. You know, how many times, you know, have you looked outside and cars have been going by and you have no idea who is in town or your next door neighbor's name. So I think fostering any events that would increase bonds in our community should be supported. Josh brought up one interesting thing as far as like the fireworks. When I first told my wife that I was going to be running for select board, I guess I kind of warned her in a sense that, you know, it does take a great time commitment. And I kind of asked her, I said, well, you want anything from, or, you know, how can I make this work for our family? And she said, we'd like to have fireworks again. So, you know, again, like I said, it comes back to fostering more of a sense of community, and if fireworks will make my wife happy, then then that would be great.
Howard, may I speak? I have to let everybody know that the select board did not take away the fireworks. We had no say in that. It was voted out at town meeting. The townspeople voted it out. The select board had nothing to do with that. As a select board member, I have always loved the town picnic. My mother was one of the ones that started it. It was called the Vernon Bicentennial at the time. It was 1975, and in case anybody is old time, my mother was Josephine Class. She also was a select board in Vernon. But it was at the town office building. They had a dance, and it was in the parking lot. And it started by my mother. And then a few years it ran with Darrell Clark and Joyce Goodnow and Georgia Boyce ran it. And so all those that ever put their time in to make that such a wonderful time, I personally thank them, and I would love to have it back.
We've been talking about fireworks and town picnic and community events, and I think personally one of the things about the town picnic, and I'm sure Chris would agree with me, it takes a lot of work to do that, and townspeople wanted it. And I don't know, several years Chris and I were there from, 7 to 8 in the morning until midnight, and we were the only ones there that are working on it. You can't do that with only 2 or 3 people.
Forgive me, Mary, and I didn't mention it because you have worked very, very hard as well.
But
that's what happens when you name people. You always forget one.
No, I'm just, but you have to have a group of people that day, the planning up to there, and it almost does itself. That day, you have to have a lot of people.
I hear that concern a lot. I hear it within my business. I hear it within the different boards that I've participated in before, as far as fundraising for the daycare center that I used to run and all that kind of thing. It takes a lot of people. The thing that we have to remember is there's always new people like me. You know, I've lived in Vernon for 3 years now. I've gotten involved as much as I possibly can in pretty much anything and everything that I could. And we always have to remember there's always new faces in town, and we have to offer to them up the opportunity to be involved. And some of us that have done this for a long time, that have been on the select board for a long time, that have been in the community for a long time, I think tend to kind of get hard-hearted towards that and say, geez, you know, we've been doing this and doing that, and there just doesn't seem to be anybody else stepping up.
I've never got hard-hearted about that.
Well, I'm not saying you in particular, but I'm just saying in general, we start to lose our own spirit a little bit. I guess I shouldn't say hard-hearted. I think we lose our spirit and get frustrated that there's no one else to step in to help us. But we always have to remember that there are always new people coming in and out. There are always kids growing up that, you know, stay in this community that may be willing to help if they know the opportunity is there. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before and the marketing aspect of the thing. We have to let the townspeople know what's available to help out with, and go from there.
I think another thing too, we have town meeting coming up next month, and I think this would be a good idea, good time to bring these ideas forward. But then at that time, have people sign up that want these at that time, have a clipboard and say, if this is what you want, pass out the clipboard, let them sign, and then let them vote on it. Because otherwise, we're down to the same 3 or 4 people at the town picnic, or at the farmer's market, or wherever, and then we're going to lose it again. I think, you know, you need to have a committee, like we have select people, like we have planning board members. And then if that person wants to step down, then have a replacement for the following year. But I think then you will have continuity of some of these things that we have lost and that have gone by the wayside because people get busy. But I think a town meeting, we should advertise town meeting and get everybody on board. Thank you.
I'll have my Vernon newspaper clip.
There you go. There you go. And then if they don't want it, then we'll say we'll have to vote that.
Are there any more questions? Comments from the candidates?